So we've just finished the month of Descent and then Dark Mother in her mystery school. And one of the women enrolled asked me to go over again the myth of Demeter and Persephone in its older version, its pre-Hellenic version. I had shared it with the women as part of coming to terms with what it is when we're asked to go on an underworld journey. By an underworld journey or by a descent, what I mean is an initiation we don't want. All the things that are out of our control, the divorce, the death, the loss, the need to find a different sacred purpose, the illness, all these things that life sometimes presents that are out of our control and that strip us down and ask us to get true and to know more deeply who we really are and to source power and love that we didn't realize we had. It's usually a brutal, difficult journey, and like I said, it's not what we would choose. And in the context of that, and finding we were really being with ways in which to hold context around the descent that give it a place that is not disempowering and that is not hopeless and that has a greater place in deep feminine context. So this is for Michelle, who was asking, and also for any of you who are curious, the myth of Demeter and Persephone and her abduction to the underworld. So what we all normally experience or have heard, if we have heard of it, and I'm no expert, I'm a faithful witness, but what I have heard, and what many of you have heard, is probably the story in which Demeter and Persephone, or Kore, mother and daughter, were kind of joyfully, exuberantly, being the goddesses they were, bringing everything to fruition: growth, life, joy, and fertility on Earth. And one day Persephone went missing. Demeter didn't know what had happened to her, and she went into a time of grief during which the entire world stopped blooming. Everything died and withered, to the point that gods and humans alike were begging for something to happen. And what had happened in that story, and this is the normally accepted Greek story, is that Persephone had been, in her innocence, I don't know, I imagine her in a field somewhere, and Hades came and abducted her, raped her, took her to the underworld, and forced her to be his queen. So eventually, gods intervene, and what happens is that Persephone is given again the right and the freedom to emerge back up to the overworld with Demeter, rejoin her, and there's spring and summer, and every 6 months she has to go back to Hades' realm because he abducted her and she ate there, and essentially he trapped her. So that's what we normally get as the story of the context around the underworld and the story of what deep feminine, what power is, what female power and real sacred female place is in relationship to it. The pre-Hellenic myth, the myth that is the origin of that myth, is different, and it's different in a really significant way. In that telling, which you could say is closer to the root and therefore less corrupted than this first telling, Demeter and Persephone, mother and daughter, are living on the earth, and they are celebrating, creating fruition and blossoming and fertility everywhere. What happens is that Persephone notices that there are human souls wandering about who have died, who are lost, who don't know what to do. And she questions Demeter about that. Who is helping these people? Who is helping these humans who are completely lost and wandering? And Demeter acknowledged that the realm of the dead was also her realm, but that she hadn't had time yet. It was too much. She wasn't yet really holding them. And so Persephone, out of her own free will and from her deep love for humanity, voluntarily chose to journey to the underworld as a guide, as a protectress, and as a compassionate, loving presence during the underworld journey, so that people would know where to go, how to move through that journey, and how to find the healing and how to find what they needed to find in order to become complete. She did eventually also come into this cycle of returning to the above world to rejoin her mother who missed her. But it was her voluntary, heartfelt calling to love and be a mother goddess for humanity that took her to the underworld. She was not abducted. She does not get abducted. She is a daughter mother goddess. Of course not. So when you consider your own descent journeys, which are probably on a spectrum from the I'm irritated to I'm devastated and annihilated, what I would encourage you to do, whatever you think of that mythology, consider that possibility of reframing an earlier and rooting in an earlier, more true, less corrupted version of what your power is, what your shelter is, who's holding you during the journey that you have to make. That can be grueling and that can seem long and during which you can feel lost. But you are held, and you are held voluntarily by a deep and profound loving presence that gave you life, sustains you during life, guides you and holds you through underworld journeys, and will take you back home at the end of life. So that is my sharing around the myth of Demeter and Persephone, and I imagine there's lots of ways that you can look into those two tellings and consider the implications mythologically and foundationally of the differences in the storyline, and I encourage you to do so. And you can write to me if you have any questions about it or any reflections on that. You can write to me probably through the contact page on Her Mystery School, www.hermysteryschool.com. All right. I hope this served you, Michelle. Thank you for asking the question. Blessed be.